Let us all begin this with a short prayer. Oh. With the infinite grace, love, and compassion of Bhagawan, we are all gathered here this day on this very interesting session that we're going to have with a very distinguished personality from the SSSIO fraternity. We have both of us, both Ashok and myself, have this unique privilege and honor of talking to Brother Robert Baskin in USA. Ashok, would you like to make that introduction, Ashok?
Yes, Adam. I'm Ashok Sakrani. I live in Hong Kong. I'm a practicing lawyer, and it gives me extreme pleasure to introduce another lawyer, Mr. Robert Baskin. He's been a devotee of Swami for 43 years and has practiced law in Southern California for 46 years. He attended his first summer conference in 1978 and had the distinction of being awarded a prize by Swami for being the best student at that summer conference. He has served as a lawyer for all three organizations and also for Swami himself, and that is really a unique testimony to a person's life and a person's legal career. So Robert, welcome, and thank you for having a chat with us this morning.
Thank you, Saram, gentlemen.
Yes, Robert, just to start off, when exactly did you meet Swami in the first instance, and what was that experience? This is going to be very exciting for us.
Mid-February of 1978.
Okay.
Was my first visit to the ashram.
Can you tell us something about that experience?
Well, the manner in which Swami draws future devotees to his presence is as infinite and varied as the individuals themselves. I came to Swami as a non-devotee and a skeptic. From my very early years, early teens, I'd always felt a strong inkling to search for truth, the true meaning of life, our purpose on this planet. And that led me, when I went to college, to major in philosophy. And part of my studies was actually Eastern philosophy, the Vedas, the Upanishads, and modern Indian teachers and mystics. And after that, I went on to law school. And in my first year of law school, I attended a weekend seminar in Washington, D.C., where I was going to school. And it was actually taught by someone who had just come back from India and had just spent some time with Swami, who was a teacher in their own right on the East Coast of the United States, and came with a ring that Swami had materialized for him. And it was the first time that I recall hearing the name Sai Baba. But that planted a seed that really didn't come to fruition until there was a major change, something of an epiphany for me. After finishing law school, I went on to join a law firm in San Francisco and practiced for a few years in an area of the law that was of interest to me at that time, constitutional law and civil rights. But there was always this dichotomy in my mental state, this dichotomy between being firmly in the world and the alternative, pursuing what was to me a much greater interest in finding out what the real truth was, what one would call today self-realization. And in the midst of this dichotomy that I kind of lived with for many years, I had an epiphany. And the epiphany that I had was one morning, the realization that I had a deep discontent with what I was doing in life, questioned its purposefulness. And the thought came to me, what would you do if you only had 1 year to live? And I really didn't know the answer to that question. But what I did know is that what I wouldn't do is what I had been doing, which was practicing law in California. And as a result, I quit my job and decided that I wanted to go to the East, to India, and find a living master, a living teacher, to realize the true nature of self. And it was only after I made that conscious decision that the seed that had been planted 5 years before began to come to fruition. Because when I shared that intention with a friend, her immediate reaction was to give me a book that she had been given a few years before. She didn't know why, and for some reason had never read, and said, this is about a teacher in India. You might like reading it. And it was the only book in the West at that time that was available about Sathya Sai Baba, and it was Howard Murfitt's Man of Miracles. So I read that book and I was immediately curious, but I really wasn't interested in a miracle man. I was interested in a teacher who could lead me to self-realization. And not long after that, I went east. I spent a year traveling through the South Pacific, through Southeast Asia, Malaysia, where you are, Thailand, Burma, Northern India, and went to many religious sites, investigated a number of spiritual traditions, stayed with other contemporary and living masters, and eventually worked my way down to Bangalore, which had been a goal of my trip, which was to see and experience Sai Baba. But when I came, I didn't come as a devotee. In fact, I had never met a Sai devotee up until the moment I walked through the gates of the ashram. And I was really very skeptical, as anybody who's investigated a number of spiritual traditions, necessity must be. So I came as a skeptic, but very shortly after that, my state of mind changed completely. When people come to see Sai Baba, everybody hopes and prays for a one-on-one contact with them, which devotees call an interview. And I had no expectation of receiving that, and really thought that I would stay on for a few months, because how long would it take to be self-realized if you found the right teacher anyway? And within a short time after arriving, Swami called me in for the first of a series of private interviews. In the first interview that I had with him, he demonstrated to me his omniscience, his all-knowingness, because he knew everything about my life that was of any importance to me, none of which anybody in India would have had any knowledge of. Because then, as now, I'm a very private person. I don't really discuss my personal feelings that much. People knew me only as a skeptical California lawyer who they didn't think would spend very much time with Sai Baba before he left, at that point. And Swami also asked me, what do you want? Swami has two questions that he often asks devotees, or to-be devotees. Where are you from? And most people tell them their country or city of origin, until they discover that what he's really asking is, what is the origin of your true nature, your soul? And what do you want? And what I said to Swami was what I wanted. Knowledge of the true nature of self, self-realization. And he gave me an intellectual answer, which I understood at the time and appreciated. And the next day, he called me in again. And he asked me again, what do you want? And I told him, Swami, you know best. At that time, unlike the day before in which he had told me about my past, to my surprise, he told me my entire future. He told me that I would stay for some time in India, invited me to attend the summer course, which was in May. And I hadn't really intended to stay that long, but I agreed. He told me that I would go back to the United States. I would practice law again, that I'd do government service, which turned out to be true. When I did eventually return, I worked for a US federal agency as a judge, hearing cases of employment discrimination brought by federal employees against federal agencies in the United States. He told me that after government service, I'd have private practice. He told me what the nature of my private practice would be. And he told me at that time that I would represent Swami and Swami's organizations for many years. All of which has turned out to be true. And then he did something that was unexpected. He touched me on the top of my head and he blessed me. He also gave me a silver ring, a 5-metal ring called a Panchola ring, which I still wear. And he said he would see me again. When I left the interview room, I left in a normal state of consciousness. The state of consciousness that I had lived in up until that point in my life. And within minutes of leaving the room, I was in an altered state of consciousness, a completely different state, a transcendental state. What Swami did is he gave me a taste of what it would be to be in a state of realization. I'd often wondered with every teacher that I had spent time with, what is it like to be in their state of consciousness and how does it differ from my own? And Swami gave me an inkling of that. But since it wasn't earned, it was transient. In that particular case, it lasted for 3 days. And it was wave after wave of the perception all around me of beauty, truth, and bliss. The state of bliss consciousness. Probably something that I didn't deserve at the time. But I certainly came to understand. And that lasted for 3 mornings until the 3rd morning at Darshan, Swami came out and touched me once again. And within a matter of minutes, the state of consciousness that he had placed me in began to dissipate and dissolve. And it slowly returned me to the state of normal consciousness that it had begun. And that experience, that transcendental experience, for me was life-changing. I began that experience as a skeptical non-devotee. When the experience ended, I was completely devoted to Swami and recognized his divinity and his true nature. And I'm forever grateful that he shared that nature briefly with me. I also lost all fear of the future and of what occurs after death, because I realized that this life is an immense and magnificent adventure in consciousness, that I experienced just a taste of that heightened, enlightened consciousness, and that would be the state of consciousness when this body no longer existed and I returned to the source from which I came. So for me, that experience was profound. It changed my entire life, and it changed to a certain degree my nature. Everything after that, I had to earn in terms of spiritual gifts. But in that very early interaction with Swami, he shared with me what my career would be. And keep in mind, I came to India as a renunciate, as somebody who intended to spend much of their life as in a more contemplative environment. And he made it clear to me that he was going to cast me back into the world to do what I was trained to do. And in the years that followed, I've had the wonderful opportunity. I stayed there for 2 years rather than 2 months. When I came back at the end of 1979, I did begin a few years of government service as he had prophesied, and have since been in private practice, but have had the immense good fortune of returning to India probably more than 50 times. Some years 3 times in a year, most often twice a year, on years when I was too busy, perhaps once a year. And on most of those occasions, I had the blessing of spending one-on-one time with Swami and being able to discuss with him many things, including many things involving the Sai organizations, both in India and abroad. I can see your lips moving, but I can't hear them.
Yeah, you're on mute, Suresh.
That was a really a very inspiring account, Robert. Ashok, maybe?
Yeah, Robert, Swami once described you as his lawyer, and I think he even used that term to Sri Chakravarti in the ashram. How did that come about? And the second part of my question is, can you relate your understanding of your duty as that role of his lawyer and doing his legal work?
Well, to my surprise, although he didn't say, "You are my lawyer" in that first series of interviews, he made very clear to me that that would be a role that I would play in the years to come, when he told me that after I returned to the United States, I would represent the Sai organizations and help with Sai matters. But in the years that followed, and anyone who has read my wife Diana Baskin's books, Divine Memories and Divine Lessons, knows there were many years that I would return to India with my wife and would often want to leave the practice of law and lead a more contemplative life. And each time Swami would make it very clear that I was here for a different purpose, and he would send me back inspired and reinvigorated, and always give me more work and more responsibilities. In many of those encounters, as the decades passed, and the Sai organizations in the United States and worldwide began to evolve and develop, there were many aspects of the Sai organizations that he would discuss with me in terms of their formation and operation. And on many of those occasions, to those that were present, he would refer to me as my lawyer, meaning his lawyer. Because he was speaking the words that was my lawyer.
Right.
And I remember on one of those occasions, he called in the head of the ashram, and he said, "This is my lawyer. Write down his address and telephone number." And Mr. Chakravarti did so. I don't know what he ever did with my address and telephone number. I never got a call from him. But I think it was to let me know that that was an appellation that Swami considered very seriously. And I'm not aware of anybody else that he ever referred to in that way. Swami was very detail oriented. And I'll give an example of that, which is a little afield, but it gives one a sense of how detail oriented he was, because not very many people know this aspect of Swami. When Swami took on a task or a project, he didn't simply delegate responsibility. He was involved intimately in all of the details. I recall one instance in which he called me in after he had made the announcement that he would establish the super specialty hospital in Puttaparthi. And he did it at one birthday, in which he announced that by the following birthday, the hospital, which had not yet even been designed or built, would be fully operational. And indeed it was 1 year later. But before that, I had been called in by Swami between interviews, because he had me seated on the veranda outside of his room. That's where I, along with some others would have darshan. And he called me in along with several of the administrators that were directly involved in building the hospital. And I was the only non-Telugu, non-Hindi speaker in the room. They started to speak in their native language, which was Hindi or Telugu, to Swami. And he immediately said to them, "We have a guest speaking English." And the entire, probably half-hour meeting was conducted in English. And it involved the intricacies of aspects of the design of the hospital, down to the details of the landscaping and how many hectares of lawn were going to be planted, and the irrigation system and the equipment that was arriving from abroad for the operating theaters. And Swami was intimately involved in all of the details, even down to telling them what color the patient's gowns should be. And that's the amount of detail that Swami would engage in when giving someone an assignment. And I reflected afterwards, why was it that he called me into that meeting? And what I took away from that is that he wanted me to personally experience, to see how intimately involved he was in everything that he took responsibility for. And it was that same degree of detail that he had when it came to establishing his Indian and his overseas organization. And many times I had opportunities to be with him in which he described what he wanted it to look like. And I had the distinct blessing and great pleasure of being present during some of those meetings.
And what was that vision he had for the three organizations?
From the very earliest interviews with him, Swami interestingly would always draw a distinction between his Indian devotees and his overseas devotees. And in the distinctions that he would draw, he would recognize and articulate the difference in nature of people of different cultures and societies. And he recognized that there were differences in nature between his Indian devotees and his overseas devotees. For him, all were one. All came from the same divine basis, but based upon their life experiences and the environments in which they lived and the laws that they were required to abide by, he recognized those distinctions. He always distinguished between the Indian organizations, which began with the central trust, and then, of course, involved the Indian centers, which were divided up amongst states, and the international organization, which in his mind and how he enunciated it, always were separate. So for India, he had the Central Trust, the Indian organization. For outside of India, he had a series, basically the same concept with a series of names, beginning with, I believe, the World Council, and now its current formation in the Psi International Organization. They were always kept distinct and different. He had the international organization formulated and managed by people outside of India in the countries that they managed. And he had an Indian organization managed by those in India. And that was always a distinction that he made. In the years before Swami passed and was no longer with us in its physical form, he made a very distinct division between the international organization and the Indian organization, and to provide certainty with that distinct difference, even, I understand, directed that there be a directive published in his magazine, Sanatana Sarati, in which it discussed the formation of the international organization from that point forward. So there was always that distinction between the two. When it came to the international organization that I'm more familiar with, he provided guidance and approval for their guidelines. He was directly involved in the selection of the officers and directors who would be responsible for administering the organization. And that was something that he always made clear during his lifetime. And I had a number of interviews with him in which he did just that. I recall one interview because in the early 1980s, Swami appointed me to be a director of the SSSIO Society of America, which is the American Trust. In India, they call the charitable organizations that are overseas trusts. So, for example, in India, there's the Central Trust, SSSIO Central Trust. In the overseas countries, they're charitable organizations. They're usually incorporated. They're referred to as charities or foundations. And he appointed me to the American Trust of SSSIO Society of America, a charitable organization, as a director and then as its treasurer and vice president in the years that would follow. There came a point when, because of the death of some members, it was necessary to appoint new members to the SSSIO Society of America so that we would have a full number of members. And I recall going to India and Swami calling me in, and he would always ask about the trust and the American organization when he would call me in. And I mentioned to him that we were 2 members down and asked him to give guidance on their appointment. And his response was, "Who do you want?" And there then followed, as has occurred a few times in my life with him, my telling him, "Swami, you know everything. It's who you want that's important. Tell me who you want to appoint." And we went back and forth, and he kept pressing me to name names. And finally, I gave him some options, and he rejected most. He selected one, suggested that I call the other members of the trust to come back the next day with more names, which I did. And it was interesting that during that phase, many years before Dr Reddy became a member of the SSSIO Society of America, and it's now president, that somebody who I knew in the West as a very fine devotee, and that I suggested to Swami, was Dr Reddy as a member of the society. And Swami said no. Narendra had other duties. Swami had other jobs for him, and Swami would appoint. And that is exactly what happened, not then, but probably a decade later, when Dr. John Hislop, Jack, who is the founder of the Sathya Society of America, and most devotees know him from two wonderful books, Conversations and My Baba and I, that he authored. He was the founder of the society and also the founder of the first national organization, the Psi organization in the United States. Jack passed away. His replacement was needed. And Swami appointed Dr. Reddy to be the president of the Sathya Society of America, fulfilling what he had said to me the decade before that he would appoint. That is how Swami is. Everything is at the right time. It's at the right moment. Those appointments that were of the greatest importance to him, he made the appointments himself, as he did with Dr. Reddy in being president of the Sathya Society. It also came to pass that when the International Psi organization was formed, Swami named the individuals to be members of the international organization that now exists and guides the international Psi community. And Dr. Reddy, Dr. Reddy, was one of Swami's initial appointments.
And so if I could just pick up one point on what you said a moment ago, they were distinct organizations. So those were distinct in terms of the structure of the three organizations and also the functions, were they? Or how was that distinction to be manifest?
The Indian organizations were operated by the Indian organization. It was a top-down, where Swami appointed the person in charge, the state presidents, and the person in charge of the Indian organization was responsible for what took place in India. Everything outside of India, including Nepal and Sri Lanka, the rest of Asia, Africa, the Americas, Europe, the rest of the global world, fell under the umbrella of the International Psi organization. Swami created the concept of zones and zone chairman, who in charge would be responsible for the nations that fell within their zones. And the presidents or chairmen of those nations would be responsible for the administering of the centers within their geographic areas. That entire organization was separate and apart from India and operated outside of India under the International Psi organization. That was a distinction that Swami drew, and he wanted then up until the present. There was never any discussion of emergence of the international organization with the Indian organization. And I think from Swami's perspective, there were a number of good reasons for that. The international organization is far-flung. It involves numerous zones, more than 100 countries. Each of them have their own cultural rules, their own cultures, their national laws. The organizations in those countries have to abide by and respect those national laws that be formed under them. The customs and habits of devotees abroad are not identical to those in India. The teachings are the same. The application of the teachings to the individual's lives are the same, but the manner in which they are allowed to and expected to express their devotion abroad may be different than that as it is in India because of the norms, customs, and laws of the individual countries where they're at. So that division recognized that distinction.
Thank you, brother. One more point is that, when you were mentioning just now about the appointment of Dr. Reddy, recently in the recent issues, one of them that came out about was the numerous appointments of Dr. Reddy in various roles. Can you comment on that? Because he was holding a couple of appointments as well, isn't it, for work in the society and other things. Can you make a comment?
Well, we are fortunate that all of us had a decades-long opportunity of having direct contact with Swami. And many of the leaders of our organization had the benefit of being directly appointed by Swami. Narendra Reddy is one of those leaders. Swami recognized that he has certain abilities, skills. He understood, Swami clearly understood Dr. Reddy's nature. There were many interviews that I had with Swami in which Swami would regularly mention or discuss most of the leaders in the national and international organizations at one time or another to me. And sometimes he was very pleased, and sometimes he was somewhat displeased. But I can share with you this. In all of my interactions with Swami over 3.5 decades, in discussing leadership in the international and the national organizations, there were two people that Swami was always pleased with, always spoke the most highly of, and always gave the greatest responsibilities to. The first of those, for several decades, was Jack Hislop. And the other one is Dr. Narendra Reddy. In all my interactions with Swami, you could clearly see how fond he was of Dr. Reddy and how much he appreciated the efforts that he made. And I share that with you now, but keep in mind the context. I am not and have never been an officer of the international organization. Swami never appointed me to that role. He did appoint me to various roles in the United States National Organization. I helped to lead it for a number of years. I was the center president for decades. I was a regional director, but I had no affiliation or membership in the international organization. Swami appointed me personally to the SSSIO Society of America, which is the American Trust, which is distinct, different from the international organization. So when I say this about Dr. Reddy, I have no job in the international organization. I've been an attorney that has provided guidance and assistance to virtually all of Swami's organizations outside of India. And I've even represented on occasion the Central Trust for affairs that were involved in the United States and in Europe. But I have no role in the international organization, but I recognize that Swami made an appointment to the international organization that continues to stand today, and that is Dr. Reddy. He also appointed Dr. Reddy to the American Trust. So those are two distinct, separate organizations. I don't view those appointments as in any way being in conflict or inconsistent with one another. When Swami recognized in an individual their ability to serve in a variety of roles, and he tasked them with that, I've never known an individual to decline a task that Swami gave. Dr. Reddy Narendra has taken on every task that he's been assigned and sought out no other ones. So if Swami appointed Narendra Reddy to multiple positions, that's because Swami wanted it to be that way. Some people today may say that there is some conflict in having those multiple roles, and my response to that quite simply is, how can there be a conflict when Swami made the appointment and approved it? I believe that you may be muted again.
Thank you, Robert. Ashok?
Yeah, in the legal work you've done, and picking up from what you just said, you know about some of the present situation that's going on with the formation of the Global Council and the suggestion that the appointment of Dr. Reddy in the Global Council should come under the purview of the Central Trust. And indeed, the Central Trust should take over some of the responsibility for signing off on some of the appointments of other senior officers. I mean, is this new idea that's being floated now consistent with your engagements with Swami and your understanding of what he wanted?
No, it's directly the opposite. I mentioned a few moments ago, I don't have a role in the international organization. I'm only the attorney for various arms of the international organization for as long as they wish for me to be. My only adherence as an attorney, a lawyer for the various organizations, is to adhere to truth. And the highest truth to me as a lawyer for the SSSIO organizations has been the truth that I know it based upon Swami's direct words to me. Those words are the words that have the greatest importance. Swami made it very clear during his lifetime and in my interaction with him and in his interaction with others that he wanted the various roles in the international organization, the various appointments to be made not by the Central Trust, but by the international organization. Swami established an organizational structure after going through the details of it. He made the appointments of the members of the international organization. He accorded to the head of the international organization the responsibility of selecting the zone chairs. And in that structure, the zone chairs participated in the selection of the national leadership, all the way down to the individual centers who would select their own officers. That is the structure that Swami implemented. And it's actually a structure that has worked very well from my observation since Swami left his physical form. I've been an observer of the international organization in the same way that all Sai devotees have. And from my observation, I've seen that it has been a very effective international organization. It's taken immediate action whenever there have been the multiple global tragedies that have occurred, from earthquakes and typhoons to hurricanes. It's brought together thousands of Sai volunteers and large sums of donated charitable funds to assist in these projects, and done a magnificent job in doing so. The organization has had challenges, and it has grown and it's strengthened. And what I've seen is an organization that's based on principles of love and truth and harmony. So the question in my mind becomes, why would anybody want to change what, from my observation, is working so well? And another distinct question, why would they want to change it from the form and structure that Swami himself selected and implemented? The concept that is being proposed now from the Central Trust of having the international Psi organization be restructured so that its leadership would be appointed by a global council whose leadership would be appointed by the central trust is directly contrary to the organizational structure that Swami established. And I guess the question becomes, for most Psi devotees, why does it matter? What difference does it make if the organizational structure worldwide is appointed by a global council that in turn is appointed by the central trust? Or if the international structure worldwide continues to operate as it does now and has for more than a decade? And my answer to that is very simple. It matters because if you consider yourself to be a Psi devotee, and I do, then what you would want to do is advocate, support that which Swami, in his own words and by his own action, supported during his lifetime. Keeping in mind that this is a structure that he established in the years leading up to his passing. Knowing full well that this would be the final Psi structure that Swami had direct personal involvement in establishing. So for me, Swami established it. It's working incredibly well. Exactly how it is that I would have hoped Swami would have wanted to see it work. And it would be improper to make structural changes to it that differ from the structure that Swami established. As a human, I don't have the right to second guess Swami. I remember in one Dasara talk, Swami made the amazing statement: if the position of God ever became vacant, millions would apply and none would be qualified. Swami has developed an organization. It's his divine organization. He established it exactly as he wanted it to be. And I, in my lifetime, will never advocate a change to that divinely established organization that is obviously working so well.
Robert, in terms of the legal work you've done for the Central Trust, for the international organization, Indian organization, and all the interactions you had with Swami and the details that he spoke about, was there ever any indication from him that the Central Trust should ever exercise a supervisory role over the international organization?
No, and it's the opposite. Because over the years, I had many discussions with Swami, personal, in private, in interviews with he and my wife, in which he expressed displeasure with periodic effort by leadership in India or the Central Trust to take on responsibilities with regard to the international organization. That was always something that he did not want. He would name names. He would say that this person did this and he doesn't like it, he being Swami, that is not the proper way to conduct himself. And he would tell me what the proper way was. He never wanted the international organization to be controlled by the Indian organization. And I think he had good reasons for it. But there's another thing here that I want to mention, and it troubles me. And it's this. For 3.5 decades, Swami always told me of the ashram, this is your home. Prasanthi Nilayam and Swami's ashram is the home of every devotee, of every seeker of truth, of every one of us that wishes to know more about Sai Baba, to have that direct experience. Prasanthi Nilayam was never my home because I was a member or not a member of a Sai organization. It was the home of every devotee because Swami made it our home. And what's happened now is something different. Because the Central Trust, in the rules that they've enunciated, have said that the privileges of international devotees in the ashram are now to be based upon their membership in the Central Trust's new organization, the Global Council. And if they don't join the Global Council, they will forfeit their right to any of the privileges of devotees in the ashram. And people now fear that they will lose their right to attend darshans, that they'll lose their right, their privilege to put on musical concerts and plays in Swami's presence in the ashram. This was never, while Swami was alive, what he wanted, what he expected, or what he said. Every one of us as Sai devotees have a right to go home whenever we choose. And as long as we conduct ourselves in a respectful and decorous manner and obey the laws of the host country, we have a right to do that. We have the privilege of having Swami's Samadhi darshan. And what the Central Trust has now done is they've created this carrot and stick. The carrot, join our Global Council. The stick, if you don't join it, you're going to lose privileges in your home. That is not right. And anybody who looks at it critically and carefully and sees how wrong that is will recognize that what the Central Trust is attempting to accomplish in establishing this Global Council is truly contrary to the way that Swami conducted himself during his life. His truth is his message. The message that's being presented by the Central Trust now is not a message of fellowship and harmony. Sadly, it's a message of division. You cannot and should not, they cannot and should not seek to divide millions of international devotees into two classes. A superior class of people who are willing to join their Global Council and a lesser class of those who do not. And to do so, from my perspective, is wrong. And I have no doubt in my mind that if Swami were here in physical form, he would never condone or allow such conduct by his leaders and his devotees.
Yeah. One point, salient point that you mentioned, in fact, I'm going to link that point to something else that is related to this. In all these the interactions that you had with Swami for so many years, for an amazing number of years, and some of the experiences that you've narrated is with regarding to like what you just mentioned, Swami never wanted the trust to be interfering in the organizational work. Is that an implied observation, or is that a statement that Swami made, or you heard it, or something of that nature? Is that something like that?
There is nothing implied or inferred. Swami has directly told me, when he was in physical form, on numerous occasions, of his displeasure with the actions of some people in the Central Trust with respect to their efforts to take control of various aspects of the international organization. He's made that clear to me with regard to the SSSIO Society of America, the Charitable Foundation, with regard to the Sai Baba Books Center in Tustin, California, and with regard to other organizations. It's something that Swami made very clear.
So
And he also did something else that's very, I think, very important for people to be aware of. Very early on, starting in the 1980s, and certainly in the 1990s, it became important to assure that Swami's name and the logos and symbols of the organization were used only for organizational purposes. And because of that, I was asked to trademark Swami's name in the United States, which I did on his behalf. And in seeking that trademark, I discovered an arcane rule of the United States Trademark Office that if you wanted to trademark the name of a living being, you had to have the written consent of that individual. And in the midst of trademarking the names such as Sai Baba and Sai Baba, I needed to ask Swami for his written signed consent to the trademarking process, something that he had verbally told me. And he signed a written consent. I still have the original. Fortunately, the trademark office only needed a copy, in which he assigned to the SSSIO Society of America, America's Trust, the right to trademark his name. Since then, the SSSIO Society of America, the American Trust, in accordance with Swami's wishes, has permitted that trademark to be used in every nation worldwide outside of India. So as national organizations have been formed, they in turn have taken the necessary steps to protect and preserve Swami's name in their legal jurisdictions. So that now, throughout Europe and the Americas, and in many areas of Asia and Africa, Swami's names and the symbols of his organization, the Dharma symbols in its multiple forms, have been trademarked nationally and internationally. And those trademarks are held by the national organizations, which are in turn licensed to hold those trademarks by the SSSIO Society of America, which in turn was authorized in writing to do so by a signed writing from Swami himself.
But that's one aspect of it, that legal aspect, but the spiritual dimension of this as well, because I think related to this is the divine command in the 2006 and the issue that Swami's statements came out in the Sanatana Sarathi. I think the whole reason why, one of the main reasons why the SSIO is reluctant to go is because of the implicit adherence and obedience to this command that Swami has given. Can you please relate? Relate to this aspect of it as well, the 2006 divine command?
The divine command is the only thing of importance to me. If the divine command had been to have an international organization subsumed within the Central Trust and the Global Council that they established, that would be fine with me. If the divine command had been to have the Indian organization directly restructure and operate the international organization, that would have been fine with me. But the divine command was the opposite. The divine command, which I know because I heard directly from Swami and experienced over a period of decades, was to keep the international organization separate and apart from the Indian organization. They are brother organizations. They are sister organizations that up until now have always been able to work hand in hand and in harmony, which is the value that is of greatest importance to Swami. One divinity, but a multiplicity of cultural norms and nations. Recognizing the distinctions between each, which is allowed in the international structure that we currently have. But the sad thing is that devotees up until now have always been able to confidently believe that in following the goals and rules of their organization, they're following goals and rules that Swami has himself enunciated. And now, because of what's being done, that's no longer as true as it was before. Because what the Indian organization is attempting to do is take control of the international organization without proper authority and without a legal right. And the only conflict is the conflict that the Indian organization is now created for the international organization. And sadly, if you look at it historically, in the West, Christianity has schismed into numerous creeds, doctrines, and religions, and organizations. It all began during the Renaissance with the Reformation and the division of Christianity into a number of different religious organizations. It's a sad occurrence. Unity is divine. Division is man-made. What we have now are actions that are being taken in India that could result in a division of the SSSIO organizations that will last for far longer than our lifetimes. It's a completely unnecessary division.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, way back in the early 1980s, Swami authorized in Italy a conference, the premise of which was unity in diversity. A diverse populations from numerous countries coming together in unity under the Sai name and Sai umbrella, working in harmony with one another hand in hand. And that has always occurred up until now. The Indian organization has recognized and respected their distinct, separate sister organization, the international organization. And the international organization has always recognized the Indian organization and respected it. The international organization has not tried to take over the Indian organization. Rather, it's the contrary. It's the Indian organization that's trying to take over the international organization. And although they claim that they're not restructuring it and that there is going to be no change, all one has to do is look carefully at the guidelines that they've drafted and know that the opposite is the truth. By the Indian organization and the restructuring, giving to themselves the right to replace all of the leadership of the international organization with individuals selected by the Indian organization, that is a restructuring. I understand that they are now writing new guidelines for the centers that have joined the Global Council. That clearly is a restructure. To the extent that those guidelines are out of harmony with the guidelines that currently exist, The new guidelines will be inconsistent with the very guidelines that Swami, during his lifetime, reviewed and approved. So the sad thing here is the effect that it has on the devotees. Rather than being devoted to Swami, to his truth and his beauty, the glory of his teachings, the charitable works that are done in his name, they're diverted into this unnecessary created drama of who should control the organization. And that's sad.
This division is really causing a lot of pain, because in some countries we know that the parents have gone to the Global Council, but the young adults their children, young adults are with the SSIO. Like that, families are being torn apart, centers are torn apart, and comradeship and friendship between devotees for so many years are now compromised, because people start to see people in different ways. So it's really causing a lot more disunity than unity. And this division that is why I think the word that you just used just now when you were saying that you really heard the divine command. I mean, basically that experience that Swami's, the proximity that you had with Swami, the fortunate proximity that you had with Swami, and the divine command that you were maybe able to witness or see or experience. Can you narrate a little bit of that experience, that aspect of it? When, in what circumstances did that happen? How did you get to?
I think I've covered that, but let me add this. As a lawyer who's now practiced for almost 50 years and been with Swami for more than 40 years, as you can imagine, I have been involved in assisting clients in virtually every imaginable human conflict. And with regard to every conflict, past and present, one thing has always guided me. 4 simple words. This too shall pass. This current struggle that we're experiencing between the international organization and the Indian organization, this too shall pass. It is my hope that the end result will be one of harmony, in which some people come to their senses, recognize that there was and is a divine command with regard to the separate but equal nature of the SSIO organizations, Indian and international, and come to respect the traditions that Swami established, that have been very effectively implemented since Swami's Samadhi. I can only hope that that will be the case. I think that the response of the international organization to the Global Council, that they agree with and recognize the concept of the Global Council, so long as it does not change in any way the structure of the international organization established by Swami, so long as it recognizes the independence of the two, where the Global Council has a counseling role, in a sense, a unifying role, a role of assuring that the direction that each group goes is in harmony with one another. I think that response from the to the Global Council's request was a reasonable one and consistent and harmonious with the current structure. But as I've come to learn and observe in life, people usually make the right decision. But more often than not, it only comes after they've exhausted all other alternatives. And I think the right decision here is for there to be a global council, but not a global council in which there are organizations that are completely under the control of India, but rather a global council in which these separate organizations continue to exist as Swami established them to be. The Central Trust continues to have that opportunity and that option. If they choose to not go that direction, I have the greatest respect for individuals like Dr. Reddy, who have made it clear that they must abide by Swami's word. They must follow his command that was given to them during their lifetime. His command was to keep it separate for good reasons, to recognize that there is unity in the diversity of the nations. And sadly, it is up to the Central Trust to make a decision as to what to do at this point.
Well, could I just pick up one point? The Central Trust put out what they call the concept paper for the Global Council in November 2020. And there's one provision I want to just draw to your attention. But there's another document, which is the terms of reference by the Central Trust for the Global Council, which is a more recent document. And these are the two documents I just want to highlight. In the original concept paper of the Central Trust in November 2020, there was a provision that stated that all trusts in India and overseas should come under the authority of the Central Trust. And in the later document, the terms of reference of the Central Trust for the Global Council, there was the provision of controlling appointments of senior leaders, which we've already talked about. My question is this: are these provisions even legal, bearing in mind that the Sri Sathya Sai World Foundation and all national Sathya Sai organizations outside of India have constitutions of their own according to local laws, which govern selection of officers, which govern maintenance and protection of trust assets, and to which local organizations are accountable to local tax authorities, which may be granting them charitable status. So bearing in mind these constitutions, local laws across the world, is it even legal for the Central Trust to try to usurp authority over trusts all over the world and authority over appointments?
You've asked a very complex question that has a very simple answer. No, it's not legal. It cannot be done in that manner, which means that the drafters of these papers completely misunderstand the legal rules and guidelines that control the formation of these organizations in nations outside of India. I will use as an illustrative example the Sathya Sai Society of America, our trust, because it's one that I'm intimately familiar with, having been a member of it for almost 40 years, and have provided legal guidance and counsel to throughout that period of time. In the United States, we have a trust that is incorporated under US law and is recognized by the taxing authorities of the United States. Those laws and rules provide complex and detailed guidance for the proper operation and administration of the trust. Those rules prohibit a US-based government-recognized charity from being controlled by any individual or entity outside of the United States. Those rules would disallow as a tax-deductible charitable donation any donation from any donor devotee if the trust itself does not fully and completely abide by those rules. If the Global Council had the power to appoint the members of the SSSIO Society of America, the US Trust, and delegate the disposition of charitable gifts to the trust, the American Trust would lose its tax-exempt status, and the devotees who donated to it would lose their charitable deduction rights. That is a simple example of how far afield the position taken by the Central Trust is in their documents. Similarly, you have national and international organizations, many of which are incorporated, are established under the existing laws of their respective jurisdictions, that have to follow those laws, not the laws of the Central Trust or India. That is a clear aspect of the unity in diversity aspect of the international organization, in which we must follow the cultures and norms of the jurisdictions in which the centers exist. So a complex question, but a simple answer: no, what is being proposed by the Central Trust would be illegal under the laws of the United States, the laws of most countries in the Americas, certainly the laws of most countries in Europe that I'm familiar with, and the two of you being lawyers in Malaysia and Hong Kong would certainly know best whether that would be consistent with the laws of your jurisdictions, but I strongly suspect that they would not.
Yeah, I mean, in Hong Kong, it'd be really problematic. And I know for a fact that in Singapore, it'd be really problematic as well. And Suresh is not a lawyer, but I suppose in Malaysia, it'd be hugely problematic as well, Suresh.
Obviously, because we got our own laws. We have our own laws. So the thing is also, if you look at the terms of reference, one, of course, Ashok said about the trusts. The other is about appointment of leaders as well. That's another dimension as well. And this is now signature. It's very clearly stated that it will become under the signature of the chairman of the Global Council. So all appointments of the zonal coordinators, all appointments of chairman of committee, all will be signed off or under the signature of the chairman of the Global Council. This is what it is officially stated in the their terms of reference, which we somehow or other, which we said no, because leave the appointments alone, and we just if we wanted to join, and in fact I must say in the spirit of unity, the international organization SSIO spent lots of hours, days and weeks working on the document in order to capture the spirit of what the initial intention of Global Council, at the same time retain the organizational autonomy intended by Swami. We did that and we submitted that. But it again came back to the point of that appointments as well and things like that. So question asked now is that also will have an implication, is it not?
Well, it has many implications. But first, let's recognize many of the countries that are part of the international organization are representative democracies. Many of the devotees have a strong sense of self self-reliance and self-rule, and being in a position to provide significant input into their own leadership. That is a system that presently exists in the current international organization. Although there is some control from the governing council established by Swami, still containing individuals appointed by Swami. At the center level, that is really what affects most centers, the membership of the center are able to select their own leadership, as it is no doubt the case in India as well, which is by population, the largest democratic nation on the planet. This more autocratic approach of the central trust deciding the leadership of the Global Council, who in turn will decide the leadership all the way down to the center level, is not consistent with the way things have been done in the past. And it's not consistent with what Swami has stated he wants it to be. So is that a problem? Well, I guess in the years to come, for those centers that may choose to join the Global Council, they will have to see how fair and reasonable the new leaders that they decide to place themselves under are to their various international organizations and centers. What we know from the current international organization is that its leadership has worked very closely with the national heads and members of their respective countries. And their customs and rules are accorded great respect. I don't know that that would be able to continue to the same degree, and I suspect that it may not, because it would appear from the apparent effort at takeover of the international organization by the Central Trust that the Central Trust members who are attempting to do so do not adhere to the same values in this regard as our international organization leadership does. So there, people who join the Global Council will go from a known that works very well in harmony to an unknown that will likely significantly change their rules and has already induced them to join by promising them benefits if they do in the ashram, and denying benefits to them that they've had in the past if they fail to join. So from my perspective, centers would be much better off staying with a known, the international organization, that works very well.
What happens if now the point is in the last mail that we received from the other side, they mentioned that accept and come and join unconditionally, which means to say SSIO, if, please come, but come no more. We should not put any other conditions, accept everything unconditionally. What would the implications of that be to the international organization?
Well, there are different levels of condition. The first is, let's really look at the ultimatum that was given by the head of the Central Trust to the international organization. The ultimatum was, take it or leave it. Join or lose all privileges in the ashram, which is the only thing over which they can have any semblance of control. So when you're dealing with a mindset that adopts that attitude, so what is the implication of that attitude for future dealings? I think the implication of that attitude is anytime that centralized Global Council will disagree with the customs or practices of a national organization, that the national organization would be given the same ultimatum. That is not the way that side brothers and sisters should communicate with one another. You never stop talking. You never want to encourage the other side to acquiesce or leave. You always want to attempt to reach a fair, mediated result. Their attitude, their words reflect their attitude. That is not the attitude of somebody that I would want to have to negotiate with in the future. But the other implication is, what is the effect of acquiescing unconditionally? Well, when you expect somebody to unconditionally acquiesce, the demander obviously perceives themselves to be in a battle, a war, the only result of which can be the unconditional surrender of the opponent. They're not looking at the international organization as a fellow organization of equal merit to be respected. If there were the unconditional acceptance of the terms and conditions of the Global Council, the international organization, as we know it to be, would cease to exist. Their structure and function would be altered and subsumed within the new Global Council. There would be no going back.
Okay.
Hey, Robert, could I just pick up a point as I think we prepare to wind down? You mentioned earlier that the actions of the Central Trust were really a takeover of the international organization. And yet the narrative of the two trustees, who seem to be very active and wanting to speak to centers around the world, their narrative has been, well, we're just trying to build unity. We just want to try to bring everyone to a common platform. What's wrong with that? What's the problem with the international organization? And what I would ask of you is, as one devotee who has been with Bhagawan for many, many years and has had a great deal of interaction with him, spoken to him, received instructions from him, received guidance from him, devotee to devotee, what would you say to the devotees who are being sold this narrative?
The approach that's been taken by the trustees, some of the trustees of the Central Trust, in the narrative that you've described, which is an accurate description, unfortunately, that narrative is incorrect. This is not a struggle that the international organization fostered or invited. It's been imposed upon them by the Central Trust. Initially, the Central Trust said, it's all okay. We're not going to change the structure of the international organization. You're going to continue to function and exist as we did before. But then they wrote guidelines, which they've now unilaterally imposed, saying, take it or leave it, that say directly the opposite. And they've falsely presented it under the rubric of harmony, when really it's a my way or the highway approach. It's not a harmonious approach in which they have respected their brothers and sisters in the international organization, but rather in which they have made a proposal that would effectively end the international organization as we know it to be, subsume it within a new organization with new guidelines to be written by, the leadership to be appointed by the Central Trust. It is the opposite of what they're saying it to be. And some people have carefully read these documents and reflected upon them deeply and had a lot of experience with Swami. And I'm not the only one, there are others. And they've come to the conclusion that what's being proposed by the Central Trust is not only disharmonious, but inconsistent with Swami's guidance to us over the decades. And I respect those who've stood firm and said, no, we cannot acquiesce to this ultimatum. We have to adhere to Swami's words. And for some, like Narendra Reddy, it wasn't just Swami's words that they heard in passing, albeit directly, but it was a divine command. What Swami has told to the leadership clearly is inconsistent with what the Central Trust is now saying to the devotees. And I would encourage the devotees who for many years have come to trust and respect its leadership, to respect and trust their interpretation of this situation and stand firm with it. There will always be those, for whatever reason, feel that that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, that they will somehow get more privileges or more power if they make a change. But any of those individuals making that change cannot honestly claim that that change is being based upon guidance that Swami has given to them, or that Swami has given to any other individual, whether it be the members of the Central Trust, Dr. Reddy, or the members of the international organization. Notably, Dr. Reddy and other members of the organization, the current international organization, have come forward and said, these words are inconsistent with the command that we received from Swami during his lifetime. They're out of harmony with it. They foster disharmony within a well-functioning organization, and the changes are unnecessary. By contrast, I have not heard from any member of the Central Trust advocating these changes, that these changes were stated to them by Swami during his lifetime, that they ever had any conversation with Swami in which Swami said, wait 5 or 10 years and then take over the international organization. Wait 5 or 10 years and then you appoint all the members of the international organization. And my response to that is, who are they to appoint? Swami didn't give them that job. He didn't give them that power, or that right. He didn't tell them to do that. But he did tell that to the people who are currently running the international organization. And for me as a devotee, if I want to be a true devotee and I want to follow Swami's words and take them to heart and follow them without question, then I would follow the positions taken by Dr. Reddy and the other members of the international organization, because I know that position to be the one that is truthful and correct. And it is not hypocritical. And I do not view Dr. Reddy's refusal to acquiesce to the demands of the others as an attempt on his part to retain or maintain power. First of all, he was given that power by Swami. Who are the members of the Central Trust? What gives them the right to take that responsibility away from them? They do not. And I know Dr. Reddy fairly well. Nothing would probably make him happier than to have a peaceful, contemplative life that he could devote fully to his love for Swami. But he has been thrust into this role. And I respect the fact that he has stood up to the demands of the others. Because in doing so, he is following his duty, which we should all follow, which is Dharma. And Swami says that Dharma is the pursuit of righteousness. And what he is doing in following the divine command of Swami and Swami's words is something that all of us should support him.
And if I could just pick up, Robert, you've done legal work for the trust together with the other two organizations. Is there anything that you've ever seen in terms of the trust powers, whether they be written in a terms of reference for the trust itself, its own constitutional document, or in anything that Swami ever said to them, that empowers them to do what they're doing today?
No, this is unprecedented. In the past, there have been instances in which some individuals that were on the Central Trust or from India, while Swami was alive, tried to exercise their presumed authority from India in a manner that interfered with the duty and responsibilities of other organizations, whether it be trusts or the national organizations or the international organization. And so there have been occasions when Swami has shared with me his displeasure in their efforts to do so, but they couldn't get away with it because Swami was alive and he was the ultimate authority. So those efforts simply fizzled. Now Swami is gone. There is no one to tell these people what you're doing is wrong. What they're engaging in is an unprecedented sheer exercise of power in which they want to eliminate an organization established by Swami and replace it with an organization of their own making. And who is to say that that organization of their making is going to follow Swami's wishes or divine command? I don't believe that it will. I don't believe that it will because the manner in which they're trying to stand up their new organization is so contrary to Swami's words and principles that I cannot envision a good thing coming out of such a bad start. And I can't envision a good thing coming out of an effort in which to induce people to join them. They threaten them with the loss of a God-given privilege, which is Prasanthi Nilayam, is the home of every devotee. And those actions and those words place everyone on notice of what they can expect in the future if they don't stand firm in supporting the existing organization.
Thank you, Robert. Suresh, final question to you, Suresh.
No, I have no final questions. I think this has been, we've come almost to the end of the whole program. Time has flown so fast. We didn't know. Do you know this 1 hour, 45 minutes have gone by? It's beautiful. No, I think it's not, yeah, almost there. And this has been, we are very, very privileged, really honored, and extremely, it has been a great pleasure talking to you, Robert, today. And I'm sure the insights that you have given, the ideas that you have given, and your experiences that you have narrated will provide a lot of confidence in making the right decision to move forward and to advance the mission of SSSI. I'm sure Ashok wants to say something.
Robert, on behalf of all devotees around the world, thank you so much. It's a rare opportunity to hear from someone who has spoken directly to Swami on so many occasions and received his divine commands, and to get that sort of guidance at a time when there's so much confusion as to what Swami would want. It's a true gift to all of us. We needed that clarity. So thank you very much. And thank you for your time, sir.
Gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And I will leave you with the last blessing that Swami gave me when I was last in his physical presence before he left his divine form. Go in the light of love of Sathya.
Yes, sir.
We finish off with Onam, Dhyanam, Pranam. Oh, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Sai Ram.